Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of DevOps Unbound. You know, we were reminded by our producers right before going live on the show that the very first DevOps Unbound was in August of 2020. So we have been doing this now going on 4 years, 2 months. We're into our 5th year of DevOps Unbound, and that to me is just mind-boggling. You know, I don't want to take too much time away from what we want to talk about today, but DevOps Unbound was originally the brainchild of, at the time, the CEO of Tricentis, my friend Sandeep Johari, and myself. We brought Mitchell in very early, and at the time it was the Tricentis CMO, Brent, and I forgot Brent's last name, and we concepted out this idea of doing a bi-weekly video podcast series that would explore all aspects of DevOps. And even though Tricentis, and this was 4.5 years ago, right? Tricentis obviously very focused on continuous testing and testing. The Tricentis folks thought it was very important that we explore the full spectrum of DevOps. And over that time, we certainly have. And not only that, but we've stayed current as new forces and new technologies came into the DevOps space, right? We're going to be talking about one of them today, AI. But, I don't want to say attaboys or pats on the back, but man, 4+ years running. Congratulations to our TechStrong team and our Tricentis partners who co-produced this. A special shout out, Jody Ashley and Lydia Normal, who never get on camera, and I'm not going to force them to get on camera now. But these two gals, week in, week out, month in, months out, they pick the topics, they source the guests, they get the abstracts done, they make the trains run on time here. So shout out to Jody and Lydia for all of their work over this time. Let us now, though, jump into today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about AI governance, very timely topic in DevOps, testing, and everything else. Before we jump into it, though, let me introduce you to our amazing panel. First of all, she's a frequent guest on TechStrong events. She's a friend of TechStrong. As a matter of fact, she's in the TechStrong gang. Actually, 2 of our folks here are in the TechStrong gang. But she is the CEO of DeployHub and also an open source board member extraordinaire, Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing great, Alan. How are you today? It's great to be on this conversation. I'm always, ragging about AI, so I'm glad that you invited me to this one. On this call, I hope that we really kind of dig into the technical standards because that's the area of interest I have. Because if we have technical standards, and potentially we can start building those standards into our DevOps platform. And I say that because I know that we need to build security into DevOps platforms. And we have this on our tail, building some sort of transparency and accountability into the DevOps pipeline for AI. So a huge new area, and it's great to be on this call.
Joining Tracy and I from Tricentis. He's been on a few times before over the last 4.5 years. Martin Klaus. Hey, Martin, how are you?
Hey, Alan. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the call again. Appreciate it. And it was great to see you in person a few months ago.
Yes.
So I'm responsible for custom engineering at Tricentis. I've had multiple roles, including product marketing, product management. And one of the things I get to do in my role is to actually work with customers who are defining their own AI strategy. And so I'm involved in a lot of conversations where customers are trying to figure out how do I introduce AI in my organization? How do I make sure it's safe, it's secure, that the data stays in our data center and doesn't get leaked out on the internet? And also, how do we test AI technologies so that they're safe to be used in our own environment? And so that's a really fascinating conversation to have with customers in different vertical industries and different segments, because they each have slightly different requirements, but they're also together all looking for the same thing. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today and talk about regulations and governance.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. Next, she's also a TechStrong gang member and frequent TechStrong event guest, our own Hope Lynch. Hey, Hope, how are you?
Hi, Alan. So happy to be on today. And funny enough, Tracy and I had a conversation recently where we started digging into AI and some of what we saw as the issues. So I'm so happy to be here today to talk about governance because it's a critical topic. It's great to be able to elaborate on it for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hope, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Next, well, actually last, but certainly not least, he's my co-host. Well, for every single DevOps Unbound episode we've ever done. He's also the CTO here at TechStrong, as well as VP Analyst for DevOps at the Futurum Group, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, how are you?
I'm doing real well. It's an interesting time to address this. Dora just came out with their report and kind of put the pin on the AI donkey, saying that's causing us to be not as efficient, which I don't believe that's really happening. But, so getting into governance, we are trying to figure out AI. So it's a good time to be talking about governance, technical standards, regulatory. How do we do this right?
So folks, look, it's been, I think, about 2 years now, right? Since ChatGPT, just about 2 years. Since ChatGPT burst on the scene, I think it was November 2 years ago. And it's sucked the oxygen out of the air of every conversation we've had on tech since, just about. It seems we're always discussing it. And we've seen the gamut of this is going to be the greatest gift to mankind ever, right? I'm reminded of that old movie where they have the book
to serve
how to serve man, and it's a recipe. Versus we must put the brakes on AI and stop it because it'll be the death of us all. AI will find us imperfect, something out of a Star Trek Voyager kind of episode, right? And seek to destroy humankind. I'm a firm believer that progress stops for no man. And I think that's certainly been the case with AI. It has moved ahead, full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes. However, in typical fashion, we have seen some governments, not many in the U.S., unfortunately, but some governments have started to try to put some governance. That's what governments do, and governance, around the use of AI. And some private industry, public consortiums are trying to establish rules of, what's ethical, what's right, what's not right, where does it tread on humans and human rights, where does it help? What's the right, what's wrong and right here to do? Obviously, some things are clearly wrong, right? I mean, using it I always mispronounce that word. Using it for bad purposes, right, is never a good thing. These deep fakes, and we're seeing it around election season now, prevalent use. No one thinks that's the right use for it, but there are right and wrong. Tracy, Hope, I know you guys both have strong feelings on this. Hope, I'm going to let you go first if you don't mind. What do you think?
I think as far as governance, one thing that comes to mind as you were mentioning, the EU, they have the EU AI Act so that they can have comprehensive enforceable standards. There is work, I think, also happening in Canada, Australia. They're sort of looking to see what's happening in the EU. But in the US, I think it's going to take a little longer. But I do also think if there is a company that can say that they are taking these steps to have critical oversight governance so that, it's not a black box, maybe it's explainable, they can ensure that there's no bias, there'd be a little bit of a first mover advantage there. I know that some financial organizations, I think Capital One is one that is taking steps in that direction. but there is a long, long way to go to get AI governance across industries and to be something that I think is pretty commonplace.
Adel, thoughts?
I want to point out that there is work being done by the U.S. government as well. We have
true.
We had the Algorithmic and Accountability Act passed last year.
That's right.
And they kind of addressed many of the same things that the EU is trying to address, which is this idea of accountability, really, particularly around what, and all of this governance is really just around high risk AI applications, surveillance, hopefully medical and warfare. But the U.S. is making some progress, but I do feel like a lot of the governance has been turned over to the European Union ever since the GDPR. We're still like, they're doing data stuff, so we don't have to. But the U.S. government they're looking at it. That bill was passed, and it says, hey, you've got to make sure that you're developing fairness and minimizing bias and promoting transparency and mitigating any kind of discriminatory outcomes. All of this, when I think about it, I know it's kind of morbid, but I think about the opening scene of RoboCop, right?
Detroit.
And recently, there was this insane article that came across on TechCrunch about Silicon Valley having a discussion if AI weapons should be allowed to kill people.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like, duh, no.
Well, I think that's the first law of robotics.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Asimov's laws.
Asimov's laws of robotics.
And that's what that scene from the RoboCop was, right? The robot goes in and slaughters the entire board. So
sometimes
while we have governance, and it's only around these high risk systems, I feel like we have a long way to go to start trickling it down to all systems that are being written and being able to take these technical standards that like NIST is working on and apply them through the DevOps pipeline to start actually working to make sure that they are transparent and that some of these tools now can be applied to the process.
Opening setting of Terminator 1, too, by the way, crushing the skulls of humans, but Terminator robots. Sorry, Martin, I was just going to jump in and say, to me, it's fascinating when something comes along that's akin to security, it's akin to data, that gets this governance, and how do we do it properly so that it doesn't escape from the lab or escape from the application, data doesn't leak out, or in this case, do harm. I mean, other software could do harm too. Algorithms could as well. You can argue whether social media does that, but AI has really jumped to the top of the list of what are we going to do? What do we have to do to secure this and also make sure it's not used for nefarious purposes? So,
yeah, I think it's interesting that you see folks like Sam Altman or even Elon Musk even asking governments to step in and help create some rules or guardrails because to see the potential of where this technology can go. I'm not sure we're quite at the Terminator level yet or RoboCop, what have you, but because it's going to be an evolution. But the evolution is happening really, really fast. And I think we're already a little bit on the back footing with some regulations as it relates to use cases outside of business. For example, kids in school using AI systems to do the homework for them, which, now puts education systems at, the back footing in terms of like, how do we deal with the situation when we require essays to be written as part of like entrance requirements for universities. And now anybody can just generate an essay in the voice of Ryan Gosling or whoever you wanted to imitate and sprinkle in some grammar mistakes and punctuation to make it appear as if it was original, authentic work. And so that's just one example of where we're, I think, in completely new, uncharted territory because we don't know how this technology can be used and applied. In some cases, I think, especially in the business context and the kinds of customers that I'm talking to, what I'm hearing is that there's definitely a need for transparency. And I think that's one thing that we could sort of check out very easily because companies are asking for where is the data going to be? What is being processed? What happens in transmission? What about encryption? Who owns the results? Who owns the models? What models are you using? And then how do I customize it and make it my own? Because I do not want my data to get leaked out onto the internet at all. But it's a very broad field. And I think the way, for example, the European Union or what the White House has also been proposing is a good one to say, let's think about this from a point of view of risk. What is an unacceptable risk? As you mentioned, Tracy, surveillance or protected groups in society and other things that, or medical applications. There may be areas of unacceptable risk where, we need to actually have some laws in place to control those things. And then you work your way down in terms of high risk, low risk, and other use cases where, it's less of an issue. But this is an extremely complicated, important topic that affects all aspects of life.
I don't necessarily disagree, but you're talking to someone who's from the generation of no calculators allowed in the school test, right? How many were you allowed to bring calculators into your test? No. But kids today, they bring scientific calculators in. They no longer have to worry about doing those equations and figuring pi and all of that. It's all there for them. I think we're going to come to the same thing. I think, and call me radical, but I think when we get to new technologies like this, our part of our makeup is to think, go slow. Go slow. This could have repercussions we haven't thought through. And we know, quite frankly, that never works. People, right? If you outlaw guns, only outlaws have guns. There's still going to be a segment of the market that's going to go as fast as they can. I think almost these governance breaks, if you will, these governors on the use of these technologies is to give our society a chance to catch up, a chance to get acclimated, a chance to get comfortable with what these technologies can do for us. And I think if we recognize that, we could look at them in a whole new light. But I also think it begs another question of, how do you test for AI governance? Right? I mean, Martin, I'll throw it at you. You're from Tricentis. You're the worldwide leaders. How do you test for AI governance? How would you, who's watching the watchers here?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily that it's possible to test for governance when you need to be able to, it's more about transparency and really sort of, like in the case of security, right? Like companies are used to, expose and report and sort of showcase what sort of security policies and governance they are implementing in the products. And we have standards around that. If you look at SOC 2 and if you look at many different encryption standards, I think on the security side, we have come a long way already. I think that could be analogous to AI as well to some extent. But the thing that I see with customers that we speak with is that, like, how do we effectively test an AI system that it gives you reliable results in addition to how it works? Is it safe to use, right? So is the outcome useful and applicable and safe to use, as well as is the technology safe to use as well? That's where I think we're in also new territory, because if AI models are passing the Turing test, then, and it's a knowledge system, an expert system that, can evolve with time, then it's going to be much more difficult to, come up with prompts or tests and parameters to say, yes, today, the answer I got back was acceptable, but what about next week, next month, when the knowledge system has evolved and now it has been enriched with new information or with new, adaptations or weightings and learnings that will now yield a different result. And I think that's the challenge with testing, that it's no longer a point in time activity. You have to almost like have an ongoing monitoring system in place But you also don't know what you don't know, and what you should be testing for that could be exposed through some sort of loophole. And I think that's what some companies are finding out the hard way. Like if you look at some of the candidate examples, for example, where it gave wrong responses and now there's a lawsuit and so forth. And that's the challenge, I think, with testing AI. What we do internally is we're trying to sort of adopt this monitoring model where we are going on a regular basis, benchmark, test, and validate, and have sort of a red team approach as well to say, like, how can we expose the models in a way that the results we're getting are no longer in line with what we expected to do. Unless there's a new way to figure out, testing of non-determinate models, I think, that's going to be the approach that a lot of people will need to take as well.
Yeah. A couple of things I would like to insert here for anyone who's listening and is trying to, I guess, wrap their heads around how would I start to do these things. There are tools out there, and you still have to know what you're doing, but you could look at Kubeflow, MLflow. They can help streamline building, deploying, managing your machine learning models actually at scale. Open source tooling. So it definitely, there's always a learning curve for these things. But if you're looking for some tools that can help you get started and figure out what you should do, those are two pretty good ones, I think, that folks can use.
Then I want to add too on this topic. There's two levels here. We have testing and we have compliance. So if we look at what we've done through, over the last 5 years in security, we have done everything from adding signatures to repo scans to things like OpenSSF scorecard that looks and determines how safe software potentially could be. I really believe that these types of tools will also be created for looking at how compliant AI software is. Now, the problem with compliance is that the data is often fragmented, and maybe you can look at a Git repo for one particular component to see how compliant that component is. But it is a first step. Compliance is important today in security, in software, and it will be important in securing and making sure AI software is safe. So while testing is important, understanding the compliance levels of the code that's coming across the supply chain is not going to change. We're just going to have different types of tooling to make sure that the model is fair, for example. How do we scan for that? Not sure. I think IBM has something called like IBM 360 that does some kind of fairness check. So as Hope pointed out, we do have tools out there. And that's why the technical standards become more interesting, because if we can define what those technical standards are, we can also define the compliance levels that we need to achieve. And while we have seen a lot of these governance docs from NIST to the EU talk about some of the basic pieces, we still haven't seen a really clear roadmap for what is compliant. And we haven't done that for code in general. So maybe we'll get there. We're trying. But we have to look at the compliance question and how do we track and report compliance so the companies who are writing software and consuming these large language models have a way to judge how safe they are.
In some ways, this is, there's compliance against standards. You have to have something to test against, right? Which I think is largely what we're saying. And there's two forms of it. One is IEEE and NIST and regulatory types of definitions of what those standards are, what you're testing against. Oftentimes, though, compliance isn't testing against someone else's standard. It's testing against your own standard. So a lot of compliance frameworks are all about what is your policy for this part of security. Like if you go through a web trust compliance process, it's all about here's what our policies are to protect data, to secure this process, to the handling of customer information, whatever it might be. It doesn't tell you what the process should be. You have to define your own. Then the compliance is, we have validated that we have systems and processes in place to ensure that we follow those processes, and if we are in fact following them. I have a sense that this is kind of where we're going. There'll be some things that will help guide us and getting some insights to what we should be testing against. I almost think we're living in this world, because it's so wide open of what you could do with AI, that organizations are going to have to publish what their kind of like their privacy policy is, or what their online community behavior policies are. Same thing for around AI. And then do they in fact meet those? Because otherwise the requirements could be so vast. I'm not sure you could really test against everything and really know whether, is this a safe system? Is this a safe AI?
Yeah, I think, Mitch, that's a great point. Sorry. One more thing.
No, you go, Martin.
I was going to add one more thing. What I'm seeing already is that this is not a simple question to answer already, and it's going to get even harder to answer, because it's going to be a more of a blended approach as well. Like right now, I think oftentimes it's pretty obvious when you're interacting with an AI chatbot on somebody's website, because that's an easy way to have some sort of customer-facing interaction. But where it's much harder to see where AI was used in process is when you have like a composite of blended service where the AI tools are going to be part of the outcome. And so you can see this in art, you can see this in creative disciplines. You can see this even like in, from a business standpoint where, we were just joking about the after for today's topic was, run through an LLM to say, like, how can we clean this up and bring it down to 120 words or something like that, right? So in those situations where AI is used as a tool as part of a larger workflow, then, how can, that level of transparency, be sort of transported to the end user as well? Like, how do I know that a piece of artwork that I'm purchasing, as an example, I'm not a deal at all, I'm just bringing it as a theoretical example. How do I know this is original work? Or it was used, or AI was used as a tool in the creation of the artwork, or in an email, or whatever, what have you. I think that's where right now the world is moving, where AI services are more an assistant role, an agent role, to basically assist with the creation of new work in a much more productive way. And then the notion of compliance and governance and transparency is going to be even harder to say, like, do we need to put a label on anything that, has been touched or involved in some sort of AI tool in the creation of it?
So just to correct the name of that tool, it's an open source tool. It's called AI Fairness 360. And it is open source. I just Googled it, and it's for ML models. So something you can put in your DevOps pipeline, right?
There you go. There aren't any examples where things have really slowed down, right? I mean, you think about adoption of the internet, adoption of the cloud, social media. The only things I can think recently around AI are Microsoft Copilot recall, where they got ahead of themselves, and someone thought it was a good idea to snapshot your screen every second, but not securing any of that information. The market reacted. The other is Apple's reaction to the EU AI Act, which is, I took it as, we don't understand your regulations well enough to know whether we could follow that. So we're just not going to bring our AI to the EU until we feel that we can meet that compliance. It wasn't that we don't like your standards, like we just don't know what it is. Other than that, there's very few places where a regulation has stopped AI in its tracks. And I think one of the things we're going to need is internal. A lot of this is judgment call, right? And so much of it is, we're going to need the internal board of, here's how we're using AI. We're thinking about doing this with it. Are we delivering on the promise to our customers of safety, of protecting their data, transparency? We said we're going to be transparent. Well, are we being transparent enough? There's so much of a judgment call to this that you almost have to have some kind of an internal mechanism to say, maybe it's not a gate review that everything has to go through. We can use some tools like you're talking about, Tracy, to do some of those things. but it's like, here's our stated policy of how we're going to use AI and what we're going to do and not do. And the line's not always clear. So how do we help clarify when we need to make those calls?
I have a more fundamental question, which is, what is the purpose of all this regulation and governance? It's to build trust, isn't it? To build trust in AI and its use. Where I think the best way to build trust in AI is to use it and see for yourself what's real and maybe not so good. But fundamentally, do having these regulations allow you to trust AI more? Right? I mean, Martin, the fact that the EU has this AI act, it's not even, I mean, it's been passed, but I don't think it actually goes into effect until next year. But by having that act, you say, oh, AI is a little more trustworthy, a little safer to use now. I have more trust in it. Because if it doesn't, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because the what builds trust is obviously transparency as one way to say, look, there are regulations out there, there are requirements out there. Here's what we're doing in order to make you feel comfortable that the technology that we're delivering, the products and services that we're offering are safe to use in the environment. And so, for example, just be super practical for a second, at Tricentis, we've actually established an AI Trust Center that you can look up on our website, where we publish our data privacy, the kinds of technologies that we're using, our security that we're using, and we're also publishing the guiding principles that we use in our own internal development to basically give customers that want to know a place to go to find out what do we do internally, and what do we do, and these are things that we are going to update and keep current on an ongoing basis as new regulations come out. I think there will still be an opportunity for standards like ISO and others to create more formal certifications as well that vendors like us can sort of can achieve and publish it as well. Just like Tracy, as you mentioned, on the security side, where we have a lot of requirements already that companies can adhere to, and then also be publishing that and say, here's what we're doing. And if you have more questions, let us know, because we want to work with you to understand what specific requirements you have that we can support as well. And then it's about sort of, showing and demonstrating and putting, the proof in the pudding, if you will.
I think this question of trust is really important. I even in Tech Strong Gang, I've said many times, I don't trust an autonomous driving car. So trust is an issue, but part of that is awareness, right? When I was driving a Tesla, I could have put it in kind of an autopilot, but I never did. But I was aware that I was making that decision. Part of the EU Act says that, if you're kind of at a minimal risk, at minimum, you need to indicate that this is AI generated. So, in the United States right now, there's, public service announcements going out about the potential of robocalls or AI generated robocall that says go vote at some other location. The person that's listening to that doesn't know that that's an AI generated phone call. So, the awareness of the fact that you're consuming AI data is super important. Anything that comes across that's been generated by AI, it should have some kind of a stamp on it, some kind of a watermark that says
hologram or something.
Yeah, something,
like the Doctor, right? In Star Trek Voyager or something, right?
Exactly like that. Because then we are aware that we are looking at something that's been that is actually AI and not human, and that's important. It's very important, actually.
One of the things that comes to mind when you say, do I get a sense of confidence knowing that these rules and regulations exist? It's almost like here in Charlotte, North Carolina, let me tell you, speed limit can be 70, it can be 55, it can be whatever it wants, right? But here in Charlotte, 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. Pretty much everybody is doing it, and you very rarely see anyone, pulled over. So is the speed limit actually meaningful if there is no enforcement, right? I think one of the things that will give confidence is, and not that you necessarily want to see governments going after, everyone, but key stories about enforcement and how it actually has benefited people and made a difference, right? Having the rules is great, but understanding in common scenarios and common use cases, real world things that have an impact. I think that is a big confidence builder when people can see it and connect to it in that way.
So I will just, rule of thumb, so I could save someone a speeding ticket here. In Florida, it's a 70 mile an hour speed limit. And the rule of thumb is they won't pull you over up to 80. Anything over 80, you're subject to get pulled over. Don't take that to the bank, and please don't say Alan.
In North Carolina, they often say 5 miles over, but there are no.
But you know what? Bringing it back to AI, this is a perfect example where if you have autonomous driving, one of Tracy Ragan's favorite things, and you tell that AI program, hey, not to exceed 75. You don't ever have to worry about it because it's not the human who's going to go as fast as they can. If the AI is told 75, the AI is going to go 75, assuming the AI behaves as intended and we have trust in it. And that's the perfect example, right?
What if there's a bug and it goes 80 and you get a ticket? Whose fault is that?
This is true too.
And are the tickets now automated because the car,
You're all worrying about a scenario that's going to go away. If you remember in Back to the Future, Dr. Emmett Brown says, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Exactly.
Okay. We don't have the kilowatts, gigawatts, whatever. Go ahead, Tracy.
This brings me to another topic around governance. There has to be industry standards. Financial is going to be different than, traffic control. It's going to be different from welfare or warfare or surveillance. I think every industry is going to have to look at it. I think the Food and Drug Administration has done some work in healthcare, AI in healthcare, defining standards. But what will be, so the question is, what are going to be the standards for the industry itself, right? The AI industry itself. So I keep going back to compliance. If you define standards and industry-specific ones, and then we start figuring out a way to measure the compliance of those standards, I think we're making some progress. But bad actors are going to do things without pursuing any standards, as Hope indicated. How do you enforce this? I have a 25 mile an hour sign on my dirt road. You think anybody's going to ever give me a ticket on that? No, because some neighbor put it up there and I fly by it at 40 miles an hour.
More than 10. But some neighbor put it up.
Some neighbor put it up, right? But so it's kind of like, it's a neighbor putting it up. The EU's putting up this sign that says you go 25 miles an hour. Do we honor that? And I think that most of us will try when it comes to this topic, but I do think industry standards are going to be as important, if not more important, than higher level, federal level government standards on these topics because they're very different.
When it comes to governance now, we see this, right? There are different governance issues for the what we call the highly regulated industries, financial and healthcare and government work and stuff like that. And we've adapted to that. And as an industry, people comply with those different vertical standards. And they're not all industry standards. Some of them are government. I would imagine we'll see the same thing with AI. I have that hologram issue where ethical people will act ethically, but unethical people will almost certainly act unethically, and they may not make their hologram have the watermark or the standard. And I guess maybe this is true with a lot of governance, is the good people do their best to do good. And sometimes negligently or inadvertently, they may miss a compliance or governance standard. But AI has the ability or the potential. AI has the potential for people who are not ethical to really abuse the system. And I don't know if having AI acts in place, maybe we have to go to criminal stuff. I don't know what the right answer is.
But you know, I think even the criminals are going to have their own governance standards.
Really?
With their organizations, right? It may not be a governmental or federal standard, but these criminal organizations, some of them are very large, right? They're going to have their own standards, and it
kind of like what Cosa Nostrum's kind of, you
yes,
only go out with your wife on Saturday night, not the girlfriend or whatever.
Right.
Well, and sometimes lack of a federal standard. I mean, that's where we are now, and states are already enacting their own laws around AI. Colorado has a law. I don't remember the name of it, but it's basically says if you're working with AI that is high risk, you have to there's some transparency requirements, and you have to have some type of review of what you're doing to make sure that it isn't endangering people, something like that. But that's Colorado. Who knows what, Wyoming's going to
California or Idaho.
Yeah. So we live in a global world, but if every state has a different policy, different law, that's a complex web to try to build products and use AI.
I mean,
Yes, and
we've
I
seen
think,
this before.
Alan, your point is spot on. This is the whole process of governance is really around a kind of a democratic system between the EU and between all the states in the U.S. Everybody has to act in a gentlemanly way and agree to those standards and comply to it, and that's what drives it. And if we don't, we choose not to. There's very little accountability, or it's very hard to even find out that you're not complying to those standards. So governance is hard. It really is, especially when you're trying to define governance through a democratic process where everybody makes their decisions across these countries and are relying on everybody to be honest, and not everybody is.
Guys, we're overtime. I got to be honest with you. I apologize, but it was an interesting conversation. I wanted to let it go a bit. I think we could all agree at this. I think there's still a book to be written, or at least a few chapters, in how AI governance is going to take shape here and what its effects going to be in a global marketplace. And it'll be up, the ethical people, as we said, will act ethically. The Tricentises of the world will try to give people a sense of, hey, we could test for this, or we can, given transparency, we can show you that, through, be in the transparency that it's in compliance or what have you, test for it. But a lot of it's good, I think, is the book is still yet to be written. So we're trying, is I guess the right thing, right? Is we're trying, and this is still evolving. Anyway, Martin, Tracy, Hope, thank you guys for coming on our DevOps Unbound episode today. Mitchell, thank you as always for co-hosting. Thank you, Tricentis, for partnering with us for these 4+ years now. We look forward to many more. Reminder for those folks out there, what you just watched was a pre-recorded version of DevOps Unbound. Every 2 or 3 versions, we do a live audience, and you get to ask the questions, and you get to make the comments, and you get to participate in this discussion. And we love having you. So stay tuned for our next live roundtable of DevOps Unbound. But until then, this is Alan Shimel for TechStrong Group. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you soon.